A year after Godzilla's attack on the city of San Francisco, the authorities are preparing to react to the appearance of new titans, and two siblings discover that their ancestors are involved in this disaster. Today we're going to recap the story of the series, Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, from 2023. During an expedition to Skull Island in 1973, cryptozoologist William Randa saw his entire team of soldiers destroyed and, before any monsters came to get him, he recorded a message for his son. After the recording, William is chased by a giant spider and runs until he reaches a cliff. To ensure that his tapes are not destroyed by the monster, the scientist decides to throw them into the ocean and bravely awaits the moment of his elimination. However, before the spider could reach him, a huge crab appeared and attacked the creature. During the battle, the two titans end up falling into the ocean and, luckily, William manages to survive another day. 40 years later, some fishermen are working on the high seas when they catch the bag containing the scientist's camera in one of their fishing nets. In 2015, Cate Randa arrived in Tokyo and, before getting off the plane, all the passengers have to undergo decontamination. In this way, the authorities claim that they will be able to prevent another monster attack. Cate has already survived an attack and the memories of that day terrify her from time to time. Even so, she tries to get on with her life as normal and has gone to Japan to sort out some family business since her father perished recently. When she arrives at Hiroshi's old apartment, the young woman finds numerous photos of him with other people on the wall and soon discovers that her father had another family in Japan. During a conversation with Kentaro and his mother, Cate realizes that they were also being deceived by Hiroshi and had no idea that the man had a family in the United States. Devastated to learn that her father was nothing but a liar, Cate decides to leave and hands over the keys to her family. At Monarch's headquarters a few decades earlier, 3 scientists visit a contaminated area and Keiko discovers that, contrary to media reports, the place has no radiation at all. The trio then distributes some bombs at strategic points in the area and, after the explosion, discovers that there is something hidden underneath the city. Going underground, Keiko, William and Lee find dozens of Muto eggs in a kind of nursery. Keiko is determined to get a sample of genetic material and uses a rope to get down there, so Lee decides to accompany her. After leaving the apartment, Cate walks through the streets talking to her mother on the phone. But suddenly the signal is interrupted and an alarm makes everyone run to the evacuation area. There, she meets Kentaro and Emiko and remembers the day Godzilla attacked San Francisco. Cate was inside a school bus and couldn't get all the children out before it fell off the bridge. This memory causes the young woman to panic and Emiko tries to calm her down until everyone has been released from hiding. Kentaro then invites his half-sister to visit their late father's laboratory. Within the first few minutes, Cate finds a hidden safe and manages to open it. Inside, she finds William Randa's bag and numerous cassette tapes. In an attempt to discover the contents of those tapes, Kentaro goes after his friend May and the young woman manages to decrypt the message contained on them. In doing so, Monarch's security system issues an alert and Collins contacts Tim to inform him of what has happened. However, it was not possible to locate the exact address where the decryption software was used, so the agents will have to scour the whole of Tokyo during the search. Upon checking the archives, Cate and Kentaro discover that their father was involved with the Monarch company and was hiding much more than they could have imagined. The young woman says that 5 days after the attack in San Francisco, Hiroshi showed up and gave her 2 plane tickets so that she and her mother could leave the city safely. However, after that, he said goodbye and told them he couldn't accompany them. The following week, Cate and her mother received a call from the state police and discovered that Hiroshi's plane had disappeared in a storm in Alaska. However, the wreckage of the aircraft was never found. Upon hearing this, Kentaro tries to defend his father and claims that he wasn't a monster. According to him, Hiroshi must have had some reason for doing what he did. Among the images found in that archive, Cate identifies a photo of her grandmother inside a large footprint and wonders what she was doing there. The truth is that Keiko was a brilliant scientist who met a tragic end while trying to collect DNA samples from the Muto nest. Before the accident, Lee Shaw was sent by the army to escort Dr. Keiko Miura on a mission to investigate the existence of a possible source of radiation located in the Philippines. While setting up her equipment in the middle of the forest, Keiko hears the sound of footsteps coming from the middle of the forest and tries to warn the lieutenant. However, Lee has already realized that someone is approaching and hides in order to catch him by surprise. Suddenly, William Randa appears and introduces himself as a veteran of the U.S. Navy. The man reveals that he is on a hunting expedition and Keiko discovers that they are both looking for the same thing. After discovering the truth about his father, Kentaro tried to carry on with his life as normal, but the idea that Hiroshi wasn't who he thought he was began to bother him deeply. After work, the young man decides to pay another visit to his father's office and takes out his anger by destroying everything he sees. He then finds a bunch of keys and manages to open a drawer full of documents. In this way, Kentaro finds out about his grandmother's mission in the Philippines. At this point, Cate is already at the airport waiting for her flight home when she is approached by Tim. The man reveals that he works for Monarch and is there looking for Kate's father's files. Frightened, the young woman attacks him and tries to flee, but ends up being captured by Duvall and locked inside a car. When Tim puts a black bag over her head, Cate becomes desperate and starts struggling, which causes the driver to lose control of the vehicle and cause an accident. Luckily, Cate manages to escape unharmed and quickly runs away before Tim can find her. She then goes to the police station and tells them that she has almost been captured, but the officer says he can't help her and recommends that she go and talk to the American embassy. Furious, Cate leaves and walks to May's house. When she gets there, she discovers that the girl has also been discovered and Monarch agents have broken into her house. However, she manages to hide and helps Cate escape without her presence being discovered. At that moment, Kentaro is at home with his mother going through an album of old family photos. Emiko then tells him that Hiroshi's mother perished when he was still a child and he was only 18 when his father was eliminated in Vietnam. So his uncle Lee was the only relative he had, but something happened and they ended up drifting apart. Suddenly, the doorbell rings and Tim bursts into the apartment demanding that Kentaro hand over the files he stole. Realizing that her son is in trouble, Emiko distracts the two agents and says that Kentaro will get the files. However, the truth is that this is just an excuse for the young man to escape. On discovering that he is Hiroshi's son, Tim goes after him and Kentaro goes to find May. During their expedition, Keiko thinks it's a good idea to rely on William's company and knowledge, but Lee doesn't approve of this decision, so the woman decides to dismiss him. When the lieutenant leaves, she and William continue on their way alone through the forest and follow a map that, with a bit of luck, will lead them to the organizations that William has named MUTOs. After a few hours of walking, the pair find a ship and William informs her that it sank 200 miles from Pearl Harbor in 1943. The most curious thing is that this base is 8,000 kilometers away, so how that ship ended up in the middle of the forest is a mystery. The scientists then decide to investigate what's inside. At this point, William finds a box containing his old belongings and Keiko discovers that her partner was on that ship when it sank. The man says that night they hit something in the water, but thought it was a Japanese ship. Minutes later, the ship sank and only he survived. Arriving in another compartment of the ship, the former sailor finds the bodies of his former colleagues covered in goo and both are terrified. They quickly run outside and find a huge amount of fresh goo dripping down the walls. While looking for the exit, the couple hear some frightening noises and then discover that they are under attack. During his escape, William ends up being hit by the monster's claws and is trapped under the rubble. Just then, Lee appears and helps Keiko free her fellow scientist. The three of them then run out of the ship and begin to be chased by a giant bat that was living inside the vessel. When Kentaro finds Cate and May, he discovers that they are planning to run away and asks for the girls' help to find Lee Shaw. The next day, the trio manage to visit the colonel and he is happy to finally meet Hiroshi's children. Suspicious, the man asks how those youngsters found him and Kentaro reveals that it was his mother who revealed his location. While Lee exchanges information with the two siblings, May looks around and finds a camera hidden in a bush. When they question the old man about what that place is, they discover that the Monarch has imprisoned the colonel in that facility. Immediately, the trio decide to leave, but Lee says that they will continue to be pursued, so he offers to accompany them on a journey to find out what really happened to Hiroshi, as the colonel believes that the Monarch is involved in his disappearance. After removing his anklet, the old man runs to the minivan that Kentaro rented to get there and drives quickly out of the shelter, before the security guards can catch up with him. 2 years after surviving the Titan attack in the Philippines, Lee, William and Keiko invited a group of military personnel to see the footprint they had imprinted from a muddy field in Indonesia. Their goal is to get the resources they need to study the sea creature and make sure it doesn't put humanity at risk. After a long conversation with General Puckett, they get the funding they need and 70 kilos of uranium to lure the monster to the surface, since it feeds on radiation. To find out what happened to Hiroshi, the first step is to investigate what he was doing in Alaska, and May tries to find some information in the data she has scanned. When she discovers that her father actually worked for the Monarch, Cate is shocked and disgusted to learn that it was her own grandparents who founded the organization. As they are on a ferry on their way to Korea, Cate decides to go out to cool off and May does the same. However, she is followed by Kentaro, who asks for forgiveness for getting his friend into trouble. When the whole group gets together again, Lee says that they need to get rid of those files, because they'll be in trouble if any guards decide to search that bag during the immigration process. However, Kentaro doesn't agree with this decision and questions why they are going to South Korea when his father has disappeared in Alaska. The colonel then explains that he needs the help of an old Korean friend to get to Alaska. So Kentaro decides to get rid of the tapes, as he doesn't want them to end up in the hands of the Monarch agents. As they don't have passports, the quartet are stopped at customs and taken to the police station. However, before they get into the car, Do-ho attacks the guard and hugs his old friend. Then they all get into a car to drive away. That day, Natalia arrives in Japan and says that Tim is in trouble for acting without Monarch's authorization. The agency didn't know that he had gone to Japan after those tapes, and the woman claims that the contents recorded on them won't help prevent another Titan attack. Just then, Duvall receives a phone call informing her that Lee is in South Korea. Facial recognition showed that he and the 3 others had been detained in the port of Pohang. But somehow they managed to escape. So Natalia allows Tim and Duvall to take a plane and assemble a tactical team to find the colonel. What they don't realize is that, at this point, Lee and the others are leaving for a trip to Alaska aboard a plane piloted by Do-ho. Months later, when everything is ready for the attack, Keiko and Will are furious to learn that the army intends to use the 70 kilos of uranium to eliminate the Titan before the scientists even have a chance to study it. Dozens of people gather on an island to await the arrival of the giant monster, and everyone is surprised when Godzilla appears. When she sees him, Keiko despairs because she doesn't want the animal to be eliminated by the military. So Lee goes to talk to the general and tries to convince him to back down. However, instead of listening to Lee's advice, the man orders his subordinates to start the detonation and Keiko tries to destroy the bomb. However, Lee runs after her and manages to stop her, because he knows that the woman will suffer serious consequences if she opposes the army. After the explosion, Keiko despairs and can't forgive herself for having contributed to the elimination of that magnificent creature who, in reality, didn't really perish. William is trying to console her when Lee shows up with the news that they have just received a blank check to fund their research to find out if there are other creatures like that scattered around the world. However, Keiko says she will only take part in new expeditions if Lee promises not to tell his superior about the existence of new Titans if they are found. In the middle of the flight to Alaska, Do-ho is surprised by a storm and the plane begins to experience turbulence. Lee decides to fly, as he has experience of flying during storms. With the colonel in charge, the group manages to land safely and walks through the snow until Kentaro finds the wreckage of the plane his father was on. However, only the pilot's body is inside the aircraft, and Kate begins to have a glimmer of hope that her father might be alive. A few meters away, Do-ho spots a tent and everyone rushes over to investigate whether anyone is living there. While searching the site, Cate and Kentaro identify their father's handwriting on a map and hug each other when they get confirmation that Hiroshi survived the crash. Suspecting that the crash never happened, Do-ho starts looking for evidence to prove his theory and discovers that the plane managed to land safely, just as he suspected. While observing the aircraft, the man spots some marks and soon realizes that the vehicle has been attacked by a Titan. He immediately runs to the plane and the monster appears. Do-ho then tries to attack it, but his body ends up being frozen along with the plane. The creature then runs after the 4 survivors, but they manage to hide inside a cave and lose him. In an attempt to find a safe place to shelter before sunset, the quartet aimlessly walks through the snowy mountains until Kentaro reveals that he saw a cabin from the airplane window. With no other choice, the rest of the group decides to follow him, but the hours pass and no shelter is found. Everyone is already exhausted when Kate spots a strong blue light and Lee begins to think that it's coming from a village. So they decide to change course and walk towards that location. But Kentaro says that the facility he saw is much closer and decides to go there alone. At this point, the group splits up with the promise that whoever manages to find help first will send a rescue team. Meanwhile, at Monarch headquarters in the United States, Natalia receives a call from one of the scientists working for the agency, and Barnes reveals that she has received a signal from a radiation source coming from Alaska. The woman reveals that the last time anyone saw a sign like that was the day before the attack that took place in San Francisco a year ago. A few hours later, during the night, a snowstorm hits and May can't walk because her legs are almost frozen. The same thing happens to Kentaro, who starts raving minutes before he loses his strength and falls to the ground. In the United States, Natalia reveals that one of her scientists has identified an eruption of gamma rays being emitted in Alaska, and these signals are identical to those identified in San Francisco. At that moment, Tim decides to speak out and claims that Lee Shaw is involved in this, because it's too much of a coincidence that something like this happened just after he escaped from prison. After a long walk, Lee, Kate and May return to exactly where they were when they left, and the colonel realizes that they are walking in a circle thanks to the effect the Titans are having on their surroundings. As May can no longer walk, the trio decide to camp in the tent and Kate tries to warm her up. Even in the snow, Lee manages to light a fire and they start to warm up when a huge crack forms in the ground. Immediately, the trio realize that they are dealing with a titan and get up to flee. However, the creature suddenly stops moving and appears beneath the fire. When it is hit by the fire, the monster emits a blue light and disappears. Seeing this, Lee discovers that the creature is attracted to heat and its body is the hottest thing on that mountain of ice. So he sets up an escape plan which consists of building a giant bonfire and, while the titan feeds, they intend to escape. Knowing that May is injured, the colonel promises to carry her, but the young woman knows that sooner or later her friends will have to abandon her if they want to survive. Suddenly, Kentaro hears his father's voice and gets up to find him, but Hiroshi walks straight past him and the young man realizes that the image was created by his own mind. At this point, he gathers the strength to keep walking and finally finds the facility he was looking for. Inside, he spots some telephones and tries to use them to call for help. Meanwhile, Lee prepares to light the fire and throws fuel on his friend Duho's body so that he can set it on fire. But before the man could light the fire, the monster appeared and began chasing Cate and May. During their escape, they realize that a helicopter is approaching and try to attract its attention. Just then, Lee is trying to find the lighter to light the fire and an explosion knocks him away. After getting up, he runs towards the aircraft and everyone is surprised to discover that Kentaro is alive. Fortunately, the young man was able to call for help and, thanks to him, the rest of the group was saved. While May receives medical attention, Kentaro reveals that his father was at the facility and fixed the radio before he arrived. This information gives the two siblings even more hope that Hiroshi is alive. However, upon landing, the team discovers that Tim and Duvall are there waiting for them. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you like the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.